only friend you got. I had to go back to my girls and I cried. I said, I was wrong.
John Force's Castrol GTX Ford Mustang. 10 consecutive championships, 157 career wins, 16 final rounds in 19 races. This is how John Force's Castrol GTX Ford Mustang didn't just dominate NH Funny Car. It won so much that competitors accused him of cheating, and the sport had to create new rules just to slow him down. Welcome back to Regal Rides, where we explore the machines that didn't just race, they rewrote the rulebook. And today, we're diving into a car so fast, so dominant, that the NHRA itself had to step in and say enough. This isn't just a story about horsepower or trophies. It's about obsession, persistence, and one man's refusal to quit until he became a legend. So buckle up, because the 1997 Castrol GTX Ford Mustang funny car, driven by the unstoppable John Force, wasn't just a dragster, it was a force of nature that changed the sport forever. Before we fire up the engine on this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because on Regal Rides, we don't just tell car stories, we relive the moments that defined automotive history. Now let's rewind to where it all began. Before the Castrol GTX Mustang became the face of drag racing dominance, John Force was just another guy hauling freight down American highways and dreaming about speed. He wasn't born into a racing family. He didn't have million-dollar sponsors or fancy transporters. What he had was a beat-up funny car shell, an overworked pickup, and a stubborn streak that could bend steel. In the late 1970s, Force was the definition of underdog. His crew slept 6 deep in motel rooms, eating cold bologna sandwiches because that's all they could afford after paying entry fees. His cars were cobbled together from leftover parts and second-hand engines scavenged from other teams. More than once, he towed to a national event only to break down before the first qualifying run. At Irwindale Raceway, officials once banned him outright, calling him a safety risk. Imagine that, John Force, the man who'd one day terrify an entire sport, being told he wasn't even safe enough to race. He could have quit right there. Most people would have. But quitting never crossed his mind. He went back to work, patched the car, and showed up again the next weekend. Through those early years, the laughter from the pits hurt more than the failures. Veteran drivers mocked him, the broke truck driver chasing a fantasy. But behind the jokes, there was something they didn't see, a man so obsessed that losing only fueled him further. Every explosion, every mechanical failure, every DNF hardened his resolve. He started studying how the best teams worked, how they tuned, how they managed their clutches, how they launched. He didn't have the data systems or the sponsorship money, so he built his own form of research experience. He drove, failed, learned, and came back faster each time. He was teaching himself to feel every vibration of the car, to hear when the engine was just on the edge of blowing apart. Slowly, the joke turned into curiosity. People began to whisper, "That Force kid, he's crazy, but he's getting better." Yet the mountain ahead was enormous. Funny car racing in those days was brutal. Unpredictable machines, deadly accidents, and a world dominated by established legends. To stand out, you needed more than courage, you needed a miracle. Force didn't have one yet, but destiny was warming up its engine. If you were in his shoes back then, broke, laughed at, banned from racing, would you have kept going? Would you keep chasing a dream that had given you nothing but pain? Because John Force did. And that unshakable drive was about to collide with a partnership that would change not just his career, but the very future of the NHRA. By the mid-1980s, John Force had something that money couldn't buy: reputation. Not for winning, but for surviving. People in the pits would shake their heads and say, "That guy just won't quit." He'd been burned, broke, banned, and beaten, but never broken. And that stubborn fire was exactly what caught the attention of a quiet genius named Austin Coyle. Coyle was no ordinary tuner. He was an engineer in spirit, a man who could hear an engine cough once and tell you what part was failing. He'd already built a name in drag racing circles for turning impossible machines into winners. When Coyle and Force met in 1985, it wasn't a partnership, it was a collision of two extremes, raw instinct and pure science. Their first few seasons together were far from glamorous. The Castrol GTX sponsorship had just begun, but the results weren't there yet. The two men argued, tested, broke parts, and spent long nights rebuilding engines under flickering fluorescent lights. But through those endless hours of frustration, they were building something much bigger than a race car. They were building trust. Force was the showman, the face of the operation, Coyle was the mind in the shadows, orchestrating chaos into control. Every run, every failure, every fireball down the strip became a data point in Coyle's mental notebook. He was methodical, where force was reckless, calm where force was chaos. Together, they started finding the balance between insanity and precision, the secret recipe for speed. Then came June 1987 at the NHRA event in Montreal. The air was thick, the crowd restless. Force rolled his car to the line, the smell of nitro filling the stands. When the lights went green, he rocketed off the line like a bullet. For a moment, the years of failure vanished in a blur of smoke and thunder. He crossed the finish line first. John Force, after 9 years of losing, was finally a winner. He wasn't young anymore, he was 38, an age when most drivers start thinking about what comes after racing. But for him, this was the rebirth. Montreal wasn't just a trophy, it was proof that all the sleepless nights, the burned-up engines, and the humiliation had been worth it. The funny part, that win didn't make him satisfied, it made him hungry. He wanted more. He wanted to build a machine so perfect that no one could touch it. And with Coyle by his side, that's exactly what he set out to do. Soon their garage became a laboratory. Every race was an experiment. They tested clutch systems, ignition timing, body aerodynamics, anything that could shave a fraction of a second off the clock. They turned the Castrol GTX Ford Mustang into a weapon so efficient it seemed almost unfair. Force would later admit that he and Coyle were like two halves of one mind. One thinking, one daring. That bond, forged through failure and fire, became the foundation for one of the most dominant runs in motorsports history. But here's something to think about. How many people quit right before their breakthrough? If Force had given up in year 8, the world would have never seen what came next. So maybe success isn't about luck or talent. Maybe it's just about refusing to stop long enough for destiny to catch up. By the early 1990s, something extraordinary was brewing inside John Force Racing. The same team that once scrambled for spare parts was now a well-oiled machine fueled by obsession. John Force and Austin Coyle had transformed failure into a formula that was about to explode into dominance. In 1990, the hard work finally paid off. Force captured his first NHRA Funny Car Championship, and the racing world suddenly took notice. This wasn't luck, it was precision, discipline, and sheer will. Then he repeated it in 1991, proving the first win was no fluke. After a brief stumble in 1992, Force came back in 1993 like a man possessed. That season marked the start of something drag racing had never seen before. 10 consecutive championships. From 1993 to 2002, John Force was untouchable. The Castrol GTX Ford Mustang funny car became a nightmare for competitors. It wasn't just fast, it was terrifyingly consistent. When Force lined up at the tree, the outcome already felt inevitable. Fans cheered for the fireworks, but the other teams, they were shaking their heads, wondering how to catch a man who seemed unbeatable. The 1997 Mustang was the crown jewel of that era, a machine that defined what a funny car could be. Under its sleek fiberglass shell lay a nitromethane-fueled V8 roaring with over 10,000 horsepower. Each run down the strip was a thunderclap that rattled bones and left rivals speechless. Force wasn't just driving a car, he was commanding a rocket disguised as one. Everything about that Mustang screamed perfection. Austin Coyle's tuning was surgical. The clutch settings, the fuel mix, the aerodynamics, all dialed in with a level of precision no one else could match. Force's reactions behind the wheel were instinctive. He could sense grip, airflow, and traction like a sixth sense. And yet, despite all that power, Force made it look effortless. While other drivers fought their cars just to stay straight, his Mustang danced down the lane, smooth, fast, and flawless. Between 1997 and 2002, Force won an astonishing 6 consecutive championships. Week after week, his Mustang roared past the finish line, while others were still trying to launch. Competitors began whispering rumors, they're cheating, no one can be that good. But inspections proved otherwise. Force wasn't hiding anything illegal. His success came from relentless refinement and an insane work ethic that pushed his crew beyond exhaustion. In the pits, Force was known for his intensity. He'd shout, laugh, and motivate his team like a football coach on adrenaline. Every crew member knew failure wasn't an option, not because Force demanded perfection, but because he expected it from himself. He once said, "If I can't outspend them, I'll outwork them." And he did. The 1997 Castrol GTX Mustang didn't just win races, it crushed spirits. Rivals began changing their setups, hiring new tuners, even copying Force's designs. Nothing worked. The green and red Mustang had become a symbol of pure dominance, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. If you were standing near the track when that car launched, the ground would shake beneath your feet. You could feel the heat, the thunder, the violence of 10,000 horses unleashed, and as the smoke cleared, you'd see that same bright Mustang crossing first again. So here's the question. When a driver and his machine reach perfection, should the rules step in, or should greatness be left to run free? By the late 1990s, John Force Racing had gone from being an underdog story to a full-blown empire. The 1997 Castrol GTX Ford Mustang wasn't just fast, it was too fast. Week after week, Force stood at the top of the podium while everyone else scrambled for second place. The NHRA had seen dominance before, but nothing on this scale. Force was rewriting the sport's record books one weekend at a time. And that kind of success didn't just attract fans, it drew fire. Other teams were frustrated, sponsors were complaining, and whispers began echoing through the pits. No one wins this much without bending the rules, but every inspection ended the same way, nothing illegal. The truth was more uncomfortable. John Force and his team were just better. Still, the NHRA couldn't let one man dominate forever. A sport needs competition to survive, and the fans were starting to see races as foregone conclusions. So in the late 1990s and early 2000s, NHRA began introducing a wave of new regulations, rules that many quietly called the John Force Laws. They started small engine restrictions, rev limiters, and clutch control adjustments meant to cap horsepower. Then came stricter safety regulations, chassis reinforcements, body shape limits, and new fuel delivery restrictions. Each one was designed to pull Force back to the pack. But here's what they didn't count on. Force and Austin Coyle were innovators, not followers. Every time the NHRA moved the goalpost, they just changed their playbook. A new fuel limit, Coyle adjusted the mix. Aerodynamic restrictions, they redesigned the Mustang's body. Point system changes. Force adapted his entire season strategy. It became a chess match. NHRA writing rules, and John Force Racing breaking them down to find the next advantage. And even when the countdown to the championship format was introduced in 2007 to keep titles close, the spirit of those changes was rooted in Force's golden years. They were trying to stop a man who had already bent the sport to his will. The irony. The more NHRA tried to slow him, the better his team became. Instead of complaining, they doubled down. Force would rally his crew, shouting, "They want to slow us down? Fine, we'll just work harder," and he meant it. Their shop became a think tank, where engineers and mechanics lived in pursuit of microseconds. But all this pressure didn't just change the team, it changed drag racing forever. Force's era forced NHRA to professionalize, teams became more data-driven, safety standards evolved, sponsorships grew more corporate. What had once been a gritty, chaotic weekend sport was turning into a world-class motorsport series. And much of that transformation came from trying to contain John Force. Of course, some competitors never forgave him. They claimed his success ruined the fun, that he corporatized a sport born from rebellion. But others saw it differently. Force made funny car racing mainstream. He brought TV coverage, big sponsors, and global fans. And through it all, he kept winning, because every attempt to slow him only proved how far ahead he truly was. So let me ask you, should greatness ever be limited? When one man and one machine redefine what's possible, do we celebrate them or rewrite the rules to stop them? By the early 2000s, John Force had transcended the world of drag racing. He wasn't just a champion, he was the standard. The green and red Castrol GTX Ford Mustang had become an icon, a machine that symbolized both fear and respect. When you saw that Mustang roll up to the starting line, you didn't wonder if it would win. You wondered by how much. From 1997 to 2006, Force reached 105 final rounds and took 61 victories. Let that sink in for a moment. Nearly half the time he showed up, he made it to the finals. Numbers like that don't happen by chance. They're born from obsession, sleepless nights, and a team that refused to lose. But dominance always has a price. The same Mustang that filled trophy shelves also divided the sport. Some fans adored the spectacle, watching a man chase perfection with reckless determination. Others grew restless, saying Force's success made races predictable, and that's when NHRA began evolving faster than ever. New cars, new technologies, new systems, all inspired by one man's reign. Force didn't just race, he reshaped the NHRA. He professionalized the teams, modernized sponsorships, and turned a garage sport into a televised powerhouse. The John Force rules became the blueprint for safety in competition. Everything from engine restrictions to driver protection protocols could trace its DNA back to that bright Castrol Mustang that refused to lose. Then came 2010, decades after his first win, when most legends would have hung up their helmets, but not Force. After a rough, winless 2009, people said he was finished. He was too old, too injured, too far past his prime, but he came back, like he always did, and won his 15th NHRA championship at age 61, the oldest funny car champion in history. Even as the world evolved around him, John Force proved the fire inside never faded. Eventually, the era of the Castrol Mustang ended. In 2015, after decades of partnership, Force switched manufacturers from Ford to Chevrolet. It was the end of an age, the final chapter of a car that had ruled the sport and rewritten its laws. But legends don't die, they echo. Today, Force's legacy isn't measured just in wins or titles. It's in every funny car that rolls down a strip with safer designs, smarter tuning, and data-driven engineering. It's in the generations of drivers he mentored, including his own daughters, Ashley, Brittany, and Courtney, who carried the Force name into the future. And it's in the respect he earned, even from the rivals who once wanted him banned. That 1997 Castrol GTX Mustang was more than a race car. It was a message, a roaring reminder that greatness comes from grit, not gifts. It taught the racing world that domination doesn't happen by accident. It's built one heartbreak, one rebuild, and one fearless pass at a time. Even now, at over 70, recovering from injuries and still chasing that next run, John Force remains the embodiment of speed's unbreakable spirit. He's not just the man who won, he's the man who refused to stop winning. So here's the question. When history looks back, will they remember the rules that tried to stop him, or the legend that made those rules necessary? The 1997 Castrol GTX Ford Mustang funny car wasn't just a machine, it was a movement. It roared louder, ran faster, and stood taller than anything else on the drag strip. It didn't just beat the odds, it bent them. John Force didn't need luck, he built his own, and in the process, he forced an entire sport to evolve around his success. That car was a paradox on wheels, beautiful, yet brutal, loved and hated in equal measure. Fans worshipped it, rivals feared it, and the NHRA, they had to change their own rulebook just to keep the game fair. But that's what happens when greatness outgrows the system meant to contain it. The Castrol Mustang didn't symbolize arrogance, it symbolized ambition without apology. It proved that obsession, when channeled the right way, can change the world. Every time that supercharged monster thundered down the strip, it wasn't just racing, it was sending a message. Don't let anyone tell you where your limits are. That's why this story still matters, because what John Force did behind that wheel wasn't just about trophies or records, it was about human resilience. The willingness to lose 1,000 times if it means winning once, the courage to rebuild when everything falls apart, and the belief that no matter what rules they write to stop you, greatness always finds a way to break through. Even now, years later, when you hear the crackle of a funny car warming up or smell nitro in the air, somewhere in that sound is the ghost of the Castrol GTX Mustang, a reminder of the moment when one man's willpower outran the sport itself. So the next time someone tells you your dream is impossible, remember this: there was once a truck driver who refused to quit, who turned bologna sandwiches into championships, and whose car became so fast the NHRA had to ban it. That's the kind of story we live for here on Regal Rides, where machines become legends and legends become immortal. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, share this video with a fellow gearhead, and tell us in the comments, which outlawed racing legend should we cover next? Because here on Regal Rides, we don't just talk about cars, we celebrate the ones that changed the game forever. Until next time, keep your engines roaring, your spirits high, and remember, true power isn't in the machine, it's in the man who refuses to lift off the throttle.